Hi, I'm Chrissy Mack from Radio Northern Beaches, and you've just tuned in to the Listen and Chat with Chrissy Mack podcast. This is the space where we pull no punches, sometimes a little controversial, sometimes downright outrageous, and sometimes just packed full of information that is interesting to know. Okay, I can't sit quietly in the background anymore. Not while this swan story dominates the headlines, and not while everyone with a microphone has an opinion, except the people who have actually lived through sexual trauma. As a survivor of sexual abuse, this isn't just news to me. It's personal. It hits a nerve that sits deep in my chest. When I see these headlines involving the Swan players, it doesn't just make me angry as a listener, it infuriates me as someone who knows the actual gut-wrenching weight of what real sexual assault actually is. Let's be brutally honest about these young men. The sheer stupidity and blatant disrespect for women and the utter arrogance displayed in these rooms is sickening. They've dragged their own names through the mud, embarrassed their families, and humiliated their club. Watching them face public disgrace doesn't bother me for a second. They earned every bit of the backlash for their reckless, disrespectful choices. However, what breaks my heart and what makes my blood boil is how the media is spinning this whole narrative. They paint this sensational black and white picture for clicks, completely ignoring the complex, high-risk reality of what actually took place. We're talking about environments involving high sums of money, illicit drugs, and explicit performance agreements. As someone who cares deeply about safety and common sense, it hurts to see journalists completely ignoring the realities of these situations. Entering an environment like that carries massive, undeniable risks. Why isn't the media talking about accountability, environment, and the full content of how these arrangements were formed? This is where my heart hurts most, and I feel completely alienated by the modern conversation. When I hear the word assault used in the press, my mind goes to the absolute darkest place, to being physically overpowered, trapped, and having your body violently violated. Under the law, non-consensual touching is categorised as sexual assault, and legally, no amount of money or presence in a room equals consent. I know that. But as a survivor, hearing the exact same words used for such vastly different experiences feels like it dilutes the agony of what so many of us have been through. It makes me question how we talk about trauma, and it makes me feel like the media has lost all sense of scale and nuance. I will always stand up for women's rights and fight for survivors, but as someone who has lived through the worst of it, I have to be honest. Something about the way this whole story is unfolding just isn't sitting right with me, especially now it's being reported one of the women has launched civil proceedings. When money, high-risk environments, and selective media reporting all mix together, it leaves so many crucial questions unanswered. We deserve the full truth, not just the headlines. Furthermore, when police step into an active investigation, their job is strictly focused on criminal thresholds, gathering evidence, interviewing witnesses, and establishing whether a charge can be laid under the law. But the role of journalism is supposed to be broader, examining the environment, verifying the facts, and asking tough structural questions. If these bookings were arranged directly without an agency or third-party safeguard, what exact communication and parameters were established before anyone stepped into that hotel room? What paper trail exists showing the terms, expectations and boundaries which were set? These are details that journalists simply cannot track down on their own. They don't have search warrants. They don't have powers to pull private phone records, encrypted messages, or bank transfers. So instead of investigating those critical blank spaces, media outlets fill the airwaves with sensationalised headlines and commentary about civil suits. True accountability requires looking into the entire sequence of events, how the arrangements were made, how the risk was managed, and why these questions are being ignored rather than just waiting for police statements or rushing to judgment. Now, as usual, these are my opinions and my opinions only, and not necessarily anybody else's. All right. I hope I've given you a lot to think about and talk about and debate and maybe disagree with. Don't forget to follow, like and share. Stay safe, and I'll catch you next time.